Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Strategic Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Wednesday, September 17th. Hope everybody survived the Fed meeting for the day. That was a lot of whipsaw movement for the day. So I will go through some of that price action for today, kind of give you a sense of what transpired for the day before I do that risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purpose only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Let me just make sure I'm recording this. All right. So when we look at the indices for the day, that's the most one of the most important things for the day is the price action, of course. But the S&P just finished barely down for the day. Qs finished down 0.2 of a percentage point. IWM outperformed, but I'm telling you, like these numbers were drastically different there in the between what time you looked at things, depending on what time in the afternoon and after the original Fed announcement at 2 o'clock. A couple interesting things too is what bonds did for the day. Bonds did try to go higher and finished actually down for the day. Bitcoin finished down 1%. That was basically down all day long. There was a little bit of a VIX crush. Basically how that works is that a lot of times volatility rises into an event. And then once the event happens, the VIX kind of comes back in, right? Very similar to an earnings report. If you trade options, you know what I'm referring to, that prior to an earnings event, the implied volatility is jacked because of the unknown event, right? You don't know what is going to happen with the stock. So the market makers make sure that the implied volatility in the stock is high. And then once the event is known, that implied volatility in the option decreases dramatically. Very similar thing that happens after a big event like today, hence the VIX selling off 4.6% for the day. So let's talk a little bit about this price action and some of the themes. I'm looking at, and of course, like one of the big movers continues to be these quantum names. Had another good day. They've had a great week. These names, but I'm going to start with sorry to be boring here, but I'm going to start with TLT. Here's what I was referring to, and I go, these are things that I go over quite frequently in the trading room about how to kind of handle days like this. Some of the things that I repeat myself a lot because I've learned a lot through these days. I've learned that the whipsaw price action, it's very, like, depending on how quick a trader you are. If you're a very fast trader, you could be making money on both sides of the market. But if you're trading, one of the things that I try to really do is reduce size into a day like this. Because it could really get you caught off guard if you're on the wrong side of the market. And you may be forced to kind of get rid of ditch positions if you're positioned to you've got too large of positions on. So the more that and you can control all this, and you want to control the things that you can control, and position size and your exposure is one of those things when we have these unknown events. And the more that you do, like, at least from my standpoint, the more that I do that, where I'm controlling what I can control, the more relaxing these days are for me. But I'll go through some trades with you, but definitely trades on the long side, trades on the short side, those, could have both worked, and they did work for me. So here's the TLT that I showed you the intraday action, but again, bonds are an important thing, and that's why I kind of go through them first, because they can have a lot of implications across large caps, small caps, all of those things. So let's just talk about the indices and what they did really quickly, and then I will go through some of the single stock movers, because of course those are the more interesting ones in terms of what what was strong today and what was not. The SPY broke the 5-day moving average intraday pretty decently, but it came all the way back, and just kind of odd, because sometimes, and a lot of times, I don't want to say all the time, because there's never all the time, but initially what you see on these Fed days is one move at the 2 o'clock, and then usually a different move, or possibly other move at 2:30 when the press conference starts. This, I think you had two different moves, and then we basically just went back to where we were in the beginning of the day. So that probably faked out a lot of people today. And again, maybe you didn't get faked, and here's what I'm referring to, right? The market was a bit weak going into, was weak for a good portion of this day, but not anything dramatic, right? So move down. Here was the initial move on the 2 o'clock announcement. And I took advantage of this by I went long some SQQQ. I went and tried to fade this move, which worked pretty decently. And even though I'm looking at SPY, the same thing happened with the Qs. But you could see this whipsaw, and then we kind of just go right back to where we were in the beginning of the day, as I mentioned. So that's the main lesson out of here. I know everybody wants to think that they can, make money in every environment, but playing defense on these days, I think is what's most important. Now, I do have some levels to watch for tomorrow. And by the way, a couple things that I want to mention too as I'm going through some of this price action is that Friday is triple witching. So you have to be aware of that, there's going to be a huge amount of volume that is going to trade on Friday. And also, we have now entered the second half of September, which we know that there's weaker seasonality. So hence, I've tried to kind of prepare for that a little bit and what I'm doing and make some adjustments in what I'm doing. So there is S&P, and I would watch this 658.74 level. And if we've checked back and we've held, and this is what we've been seeing now for months, right? Is that we see these little dips and the market keeps defending them and buying them up. And that's why I think that the market really doesn't go down that much. Right, you could come up with a whole bunch of theories, but I just think that there's buyers that are ready to come into these little market dips. And here was the break in the Qs, right? Break on this is the 1 hour chart, broke this 200 period moving average. It looks like we were going to come down here to the top of the value, and before we do that, we come right back up, and buyers swarm in here. You could again see this on the 5 minute, and notice that we took out this second lower VPOC and bounced off of this. This was right around 250. And then from there's a heck of a rebound. Now, again, we couldn't get all the way back there, but we are still decently above that value area for the week. So while SPY is just above, Qs have a different looking picture here and are decently above. Now, here's the one that was the most volatile. And IWM was really all over the place. And IWM, this doesn't always happen, and it happened intraday, but IWM loves to move the most that it normally moves. If you go back and you look at a chart and you look at particular days in IWM, the days where it moves the most is where there is either big economic news or something from the Fed. Right. So I know some people are like, you don't have to pay attention to economics, or you don't have to pay attention to um to Fed days. And some people and I agree, price matters most. But when you look at the biggest days that you've seen in IWM over the years, I would say 90% of the biggest days in IWM are because of one of those events, right? Either economics or the Fed meeting. So today you had that intraday, try to go higher, failed, and just kind of came right back in here. So, we didn't lose any ground, but I would say that's really kind of tough. And for now, I would just pay attention to these support levels, 230, 238, and then just monitor when something changes. And I know that could be, like I said, going back to what I had just mentioned a few minutes ago, you have to be careful of intraday moves. Now, of course, today you're going to see more intraday moves because of the Fed, but it's always the closing print is the most important thing, not what happens, intraday for trading. But there you go. So I had come into today with not a lot of positions on. And I had SPY puts on, and those SPY puts, I actually was able to take nice profits today in that. And I also constructed a long IWM trade, and I was able to take profits on that as well. So that said, let's get to some of the movers. I'm going to start with what I think is one of the strongest group this week is probably the quantum stocks. And there is a quantum ETF out there. It's not the best representation of the group, because this so often is the case where they mix in a bunch of different names. Where they mix in a bunch of different names in an ETF, and then they call it what they want. Now, you do have IONQ, RGTI, those are the biggest weights, but they only make up 4% of the ETF. Oracle, MDB, Broadcom, Google, they're also in this bunch. So even though it's not a great representation of just quantum names, there still is some strong names in here. You know, Oracle and Broadcom have done particularly well, and that's a really nice breakout in the quantum ETF from where we were in the beginning of September. So some groups have had a spectacular September so far, and this is one of them. And INOQ just announced that they're doing something with the government, but that's one heck of a breakout that we've seen out of this base for a while. I've been a big fan of these names, but not always. You know, I've talked a lot about quantum names in the beginning of the year. Probably less so as the year has gone on. RGTI, you know, got to the down. I thought that's I've talked about this one in a couple previous videos, how touches of the 50-day moving average have been very good. Now we haven't seen this before. I mean, this is an explosion off of the 50-day moving average touch. So very impressive. QBTS had a huge day today. I mean, and it's tough to hold these in because these are some of the most sensitive, most highest beta names. It's tough to hold these through a day like today, but I think this kind of tells you that it's a lot of risk on that is in this market. And if you go through, you know, you know, BE is another name that just it doesn't care. It goes up another 8.7% today. I mean, these are parabolic moves. This thing was just at 60 bucks a couple weeks ago. It's now at $80. Very, very fast. ALAB got another price target raise. Stocks up again. Um, IREN, we talked about this one. It was down 2% today, and look at it close up 4% for the day. So, you know, the names that are down a little bit, you know, I had talked about this coming in right into some support. Let's see if I can bring this up in here. Right into this like 200 period moving average and a nice bounce off of that. Very, very impressive. I actually put some CRDO on, right? This is one that's been going sideways, and considering just these things, this still has to break through the top of the value area. Let's see if I can just get this here. Still has to break through that top of the value area, which is 168.40. There's so many of these things that are consolidating and going higher. I thought it made sense to pre-position in this a little bit. I also got long some IBM. It is also, I think, has, you know, certainly it's not a pure play on quantum, but it also has some exposure there. So of course it didn't move as fast today, but I didn't want something high beta today. As some of the pure plays on quantum, I wanted something a little bit slower moving, lower beta with today's Fed movement. Now, again, some people don't care and they don't care about events and they just trade through them. I'm a little bit different that way. Again, I just know that the risk that's involved in these days, and you could see reversals and all of that. Thankfully, didn't get that for growth traders, but you know, have seen it many times before. NBIS started to resolve out of is starting to resolve out of this consolidation higher. That's NBIS. Team is another one that I'm watching. Another super high beta name, holding in where it needs to, just above the top of the value area. So other than that, we've seen a heck of a move in some of the China names. I was able to take some more profits. I took profits right on the open today in JD.com. I mentioned the 200-day moving average was my main target. So hit that today. Also, another name that I got long the other day is Pony. I'm looking for this to extend to that VPOC up there right around 18 bucks. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to keep this video a bit short today and leave it there for now. But ultimately, I think the main thing that I'm doing is just watching my support levels. I do still have, even though I was able to take a nice target in the SPY hedge, I'm still holding a hedge, and I will do that till the end of the month, because that weaker seasonality does kick in the once we get to the halfway point of the month, and kind of go from there. All right, guys, have a great night, and hope you like I said, hope you survived Fed Day today. Have a great rest of your day and night.